Let's go ahead and look at the first one on the slide here. And this is what he calls type A. Will be type A, type B, type C, type C. This is his material. I want to make sure that we don't get credit for this. This is his group. They're at MST, Melbourne School of Theology, where we both got our degrees. Well, you're getting your degree. I got my degree from this school. And here you find changing of the meaning of the nouns. There are 11 instances where the meaning of the nouns do change. He's only got 9 of them on the screen there. And you can just look at them if you want to just unpack 1 or 2 of them, just showing the difference. The first one is what all the Muslims look at, and that's chapter 1, verse 4.
That's right. It's fascinating, of course, is verse 4 in Surah Al-Fatiha, the opener, the particular chapter that Muslims read daily in prayers, about 17 times a day. But even it's very popular among Muslims. They read it for almost anything and everything. So here's what's describing Allah in left side, Hafs, as Malik, the owner.
Got off there.
Right? And in Warsh, Malik, king. Big difference between an owner and a king, by the way.
There you go. Fatah versus Dagar Aleph on the left. And you can see, going right down the list, a bird versus flying, means of support versus valuable, the peace versus the greeting. I mean, these are completely different words, just by changing the vowelization, or in some cases, the dots. Good tidings versus proclamation. Indeed a magician and indeed magic. We went and did that one actually in the previous episode where we unpacked that one. So there you can see, and we also looked at the ones of 2 kinds of magic versus 2 magicians. So that even gets it even more perverse. And of course, big versus men, we did that one as well, 3368. Let's look at the next one. And here are type B, what he calls type B, which are changing nouns from singular to plural. You can see, we talked about the one, chapter 2, verse 184, and this has a huge difference. This has huge significance on the practice of what you do during the fast. Do you give money for just one person or for many people?
That's correct. And like we said, the one you highlighted in chapter 2, verse 184, Hafs says miskeen in a singular, one poor person. Warsh means masakin. And remember, folks, we said in the Arabic, plural means a minimum of 3 or more. In a religion of works, you accumulate deeds, and this is in the context of fasting. If you could not fast, you can substitute for that by feeding Hafs 1 person or Warsh at least 3. And you can see the barakah, the rewards will be different.
Yeah. There are 13 of these. He only has 8 listed here. We did look at chapter 66, verse 12, the plural for books versus singular for books, a book, and we saw that there was a mistake here. That was a grammatical mistake. Let's look at the next one. This is type C. These are changing meaning from a noun to a preposition or a verb. Fascinating. He made versus maker, or slaves versus with. It not only does it change the context, it also changes the word. Completely different meaning.
Right, exactly. And again, it's extremely important when you say that this is a book preserved in the preserved tablets in heaven and was revealed to someone. Which way was it revealed?
Okay. This next slide is the type D, what he calls the changes meaning to a different verb. There are 6 inferences. He gives all 6 of them there. And fascinating, look at number 2. We did this one earlier, chapter 2, verse 10. They lied versus they disbelieved. Well, what is it? Is it lying that causes the problem, or is disbelieving causing the problem? So you can see that would be a difference that would completely be a difference in theology there.
Absolutely. And again, I'm hoping that people can see the difference. The one that you highlighted the most, number 5, is very obvious.
Chapter 3, verse 146.
Qatala versus qutila. Here's what's going on. One is doing the act of fighting. That's qatala, according to Hafs. One, according to Warsh, was killed. Big difference between being alive and fighting. The other one, you have been killed.
Yeah. Yeah, especially if you're the one that's involved.
And you're telling me this doesn't change meaning.
I would like to know if I'm going to be killed or just I'm going to fight. And there's a difference in vowelization. This has nothing to do with dots. There you can see a dagar aleph on the katal, and you can see it's missing, but it has a dhamma rather than a fatha in the case of Warsh on the right. Let's look at some other context. Here is another type E, he calls this. This is changing a verb from active to passive. And he says that there are 7 instances. He's got the 7 that are up there. Chapter 9, verse 37 are led astray, or he leads astray. Who does the action here? And that's why it is important when you look at this as to the author of this action. It makes a difference because it has a contextual very
absolutely. And remember, we covered a number of those examples from being active versus passive. In the passive, now we don't even know who's doing the action. versus in the active, at least you can ascertain that, okay, maybe the speaker is the one who's doing that.
And of course, the last one, are they killed or are they simply fight? That's getting much similar to one we saw earlier with that. Now we get to F, changing a verb from a second person singular, you, to a third person singular, he. And we looked at some of these. In fact, we looked at one of these in the past former episodes. Is it he saved us or you saved us? Well, that would have theological implications, enormous theological implications in that context.
That's correct.
We go to this one here, and it's very small. I'm sorry about that because I couldn't get it into the slide enough. And this one is changing a verb from a first person plural, we, to first person singular or second person singular or third person singular. And you can see the arrows that he has there because it changes it in so many times that you can see that it has implications and it has ramifications theological as well. There are so much we could get on this. There are so many instances of this. He has 20 that is listed just on that graph. Every one of these you could write an article on. Every one of these you could write an article on and make the impact and show how the meaning is changed. When we look at the next one here, type H, it's changing a verb from a second person plural to a third person plural, they. He gives 23 instances. He only gives 22 of them there. Chapter 2, verse 140, you say versus they say. This is one that is fascinating. In some cases, it's also changed to say imperative. We're going to get to that one. And this is the ones that that Dan Brubaker has been brought up. Even this is done over and over again in many of his variants that he finds from the Razm, not from the Razm that are added at a later date because of the imperatives then introduced at a later date. They say versus you say in chapter chapter 17, verse 42. I want to look at this one. This is the type I, changing from masculine to feminine. Now, in some cases, this actually gives grammatical incorrect because masculine plural is always with a human, whereas feminine plural is always with an object. In some cases, we don't have time to unpack them here, but there are many instances where Bernie Power shows that this is a grammatical mistake by doing this.
Correct.
And a lot of times, it's not just only on Warsh, it's also done on the Hafs side. Hafs makes this mistake, so does Warsh make this mistake. Whether or not they weren't aware of this grammatical rule or not, I don't know. But it's fascinating that this is not consistent only on one side. And then we get to type J, which is changing a statement to command. Here is the imperative versus statement. I don't know if you want to look at any of those. He said versus say. One is kala, the other is kul. You can see that the dagar aleph is taken out, and so is the fatha, and replaced with the dama. And of course, it has a fascinating because Dan Brubaker does look at quite a few of these in his own context.
I mean, Jay, to change a verb from just sharing about a narrative and the verb is in a present or a past tense versus becoming a command now, I'm commanding you to do something, the context itself can change.
Not only that, but it's
the meaning, I should say.
In some cases, he said that's a person. To say, that's God saying it. So it's either a person that's making the command, or it is God that's making
the source of the command. Yeah.
And that's why when we've looked at these, and we have shown it, it really does change the theology. If God's saying it, that's a lot different than if just one person is saying it.
Exactly.
And we'll end with this one here, and this is the change of meaning, a different letter for a conjunction with a similar meaning. Now, looking at it face by face, it looks like they're exactly the same until you look at the reference, or until you look at the writing itself. The writing changes, yet the context stays much the same.
Exactly. Now, folks, let me just look at this, folks. You looked at all of the schedules that we've been showing you, the tables in this case. Every single one of those lines represents a different reading. Therefore, I would argue it's a different Quran. Don't tell me it's the same Quran that is preserved in heaven. It's impossible that it was preserved in all of these ways. And even it's impossible that the Prophet of Islam revealed it in all of these ways. Who did he reveal it to, these different ways? If Omar himself was surprised to discover this later on, before probably the death of the Prophet, around maybe a couple of years before he died, then we have a problem here. I mean, was that tradition even accurate? Was it just invented just to try to, water down the issue, the problems that Ibn Mujahid had to deal with, and later on others had to deal with? So you can see that you don't tell me this is one Quran. Every line represents a different Quran. Why? Because if you believe that not a single letter changed, not a single word changed, not a dot, not a diddle, you know what? Every line represents a change. Therefore, you have a different Quran.